Welcome to this session on the Community of Christ and the RLDS Legacy of Faith in Iowa. My name is Jed Woodworth, and I'll be moderating this session. Our first speaker, Lachlan Mackay, is a member of the Council of the 12 Apostles of the Community of Christ. He is assigned to the Northeast USA mission field. He also serves as Historic Sites Director and Church History and Sacred Stories Ministry Team Lead. A native of Independence, Missouri, Lach received a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Russian Arts Studies from the University of Missouri-Columbia. He is active in the John Whitmer Historical Association, the Mormon History Association, and the Nauvoo, Illinois Chamber of Commerce. He co-authored A Time of Transition, the Kirtland Temple, 1838 to 1880. He was the winner of the John Whitmer Historical Association's Best Article Award for 1999. He also has published articles in the Mormon Historical Studies Journal, the Encyclopedia of Latter-day Saint History, the Journal of Mormon History, and Religion in Ohio, Profiles of Faith Communities. And on a personal note, I worked with Lach planning the Mormon History meeting some years ago in Kirtland and really loved my association with him. Lach will be presenting with Barbara Bernauer, who is a past president of the John Whitmer Historical Association. She holds a master's degree in secondary education and served for many years as the assistant archivist for the Community of Christ. She has published articles in the John Whitmer Journal, Restoration Studies, and Saints Herald, and has presented on the RLDS Church in southwestern Iowa at the Mormon History Association. Our third panelist, Tina Potoff, is Senior Vice President of Communications at Hy-Vee Corporation, which is the largest employer in Iowa, if possibly the second largest. Anyway, large. Tina has extensive communication experience, ranging from broadcasting to media relations to corporate communications. She holds a Bachelor of Business Administration degree with a double major in marketing and communications from the University of Notre Dame. After graduation, she worked as a television anchor and reporter in Louisiana, Missouri, and Iowa for several years. In 2006, she moved to the Iowa Lottery to handle public affairs and media relations before she was chosen to be communications director of the Rebuild Iowa office in 2008. She was then selected as the external communications and media relations manager for Mid-American Energy Company. Tina joined Hy-Vee in 2015 as a senior communications manager and was named Vice President Communications in September of 2017. She was promoted to Senior Vice President Communications in June of 2019. So all of the panelists that I have just told you something about are going to be speaking to us remotely. Our panelist who is here live, Dan Kelty, is a passionate advocate for the North Minneapolis community. Kelty began library training while attending, how do you say the college name? Bemidji State College. After college, he joined the Navy, where he worked in the Quality Assurance Library. Kelty then attended the University of Michigan's Library School. He was phenomenal in reaching out to individuals and organizations in North Minneapolis, creating partnerships to better serve the community of Sumner Library. Dan Kelty is now a historian for Headwaters Mission Center, Community of Christ. He has authored 2 published papers in the John Whitmer Historical Association Journal and contributed to the MormonPlaces.byu website with information on RLDS, Cutlerite, Strangite, and Southern California RLDS branches. In addition, Kelty performs prison ministry as an ordained elder of the Community of Christ and works on extending civil rights of felons who have served their time. So first, let's begin with Lachlan Mackay and Barbara Bernauer, who will be speaking on Community of Christ in Western Iowa. Then we'll go to Tina Potoff, who will be speaking on Hy-Vee Grocery Stores, a remarkable Iowa success story. And finally, Dan Kelty, Latter-day Saints, a view of the Mormon battalion members and families who went with other restoration groups. Lach and Barbara.
It is a privilege to be with you today, even though I'm joining from Nauvoo, Illinois. Also a privilege to present with Barbara Bernauer, who is Community of Christ expert on the history in Southwest Iowa. So I'm going to share just a little context, and then Barbara is going to talk about the RLDS experience there, and I'll finish with just a few minutes on the legacy of the church in Southwest Iowa. So again, a little context. Community of Christ shares with other Latter-day Saint tradition churches a common heritage or history, starting in April 6th of 1830 with Joseph Smith Jr. Following his assassination on June 27 of 1844, of course, his followers fragmented. There were soon a number of succession options, which meant there were soon a number of rival organizations. They were scattered across the Midwest and even beyond the western boundary. You'll see focused in Southwest Iowa, Charles Thompson, Alpheus Cutler, followers of Brigham Young. There were also Strangites and some others. A note on names. What Joseph Smith established in 1830 was the Church of Christ. 1834, it became the Church of the Latter-day Saints. 1838, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With Joseph's death, there were soon multiple churches sharing that name. We kept saying, no, we're not that Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We often were known as the new organization early on as well. We tried to solve the confusion by tacking reorganized on the front in 1872, and then became known as Community of Christ in 2001. Barbara and I will use new organization, our LDS Church, and Community of Christ interchangeably today. A little bit on the new organization. You see some of the centers of Midwestern Mormonism in the late 1840s and early 1850s. Several of those people, particularly Jason Briggs and Zenas Gurley, began coming together in the early 1850s. Briggs was a former Strangite, as well as a follower of Joseph's brother William, and Zenas Gurley, also a former Strangite. Critically important was the joining with them of William Marks. He had been the Nauvoo stake president, as well as the president of the High Council here in Nauvoo. He was a good friend of the Smith family. He had bounced around between various Latter-day Saint tradition churches before landing with the new organization. Because of Briggs and Gurley's locations, soon there's concentrations of RLDS members in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. In April 6th of 1860, Emma and Joseph Smith III joined with them. They affiliated with this new organization on the strength of their original baptism. Joseph Smith III was ordained their prophet and president. Emma appointed to create a number of new hymnals for them, and they organized a branch or congregation in Nauvoo. Our story today is going to focus on those who had started across the plains from Nauvoo, hit Southwest Iowa. They're following Brigham Young initially. Some of them ended up remaining in winter quarters and surrounding areas due to disaffection, illness, or lack of resources. Others made it all the way to the Salt Lake Valley, became disaffected, and returned to the Council Bluffs area. Almost every old RLDS family has a story of having to wrap their wagon wheels with rags to sneak out in the middle of the night to avoid the destroying angels. I have no idea if there's any truth behind that folklore, but it's out there. Some of the people who came back to the Midwest had decided to participate in plural marriage. They tragically sometimes left families in Utah. In other cases, they brought them back, cared for them, but were no longer husband and wife. Still others that became part of this story were immigrant converts from the United Kingdom and Scandinavia who learned about polygamy for the first time while on the trail and dropped off, stayed in the Midwest. Others were followers of Alpheus Cutler, who settled near Manti or Shenandoah, Iowa. and then also followers of Charles B. Thompson in Preparation, Iowa, later Monona County. So what we're really here to talk about, I'll turn things over to Barbara now.
Okay. Geography determines history. This statement, which seems self-evident, is sometimes overlooked by historians. For people who live determines their history in a large part. The physical environment often determines human development, actions, and decisions. This relationship of geography and history can be seen in the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Community of Christ. When thousands left Nauvoo in 1846 and others joined them in the trek across Iowa into the 1850s, they came to a physical barrier, the Missouri River. Richard Bennett's book, Mormons at the Missouri, tells this story so well. Quote, in the light of the unending tribulations and disappointments, the temptation to settle in Pottawatomie County, and the growing visibility of certain unorthodox religious practices, the church suffered membership losses between July 1846 and the summer of 1852. Thanks to the barrier created by the Missouri, many of the lost were concentrated in southwest Iowa. By 1852, most of those who were going to respond to the call to gather to Brigham's Zion in the desert had left. But many remained and were joined by others who chose not to continue west, and later by those who returned from Utah. In the summer of 1859, the number of saints who had joined the new organization had increased dramatically. Their June conference in Amboy, Illinois, resulted in the appointment of William W. Blair and Edmund Briggs, who were assigned a mission to contact the scattered saints by journeying across Iowa. Again, geography played a part in this. The emergent RLDS Church sent missionaries to the area of greatest concentration of inactive and former LDS members, Southwest Iowa. It was easier for these missionaries to find common ground with the old stock than to start afresh with those who knew nothing of the restoration gospel. Among the scattered saints were those who had run the gauntlet of all the trials and persecutions that Mormonism had provided and wanted no more. They had suffered loss of physical health, personal property, and loved ones. They were out of money, out of patience, and some were out of religion. They chose to drop out of the line of wagons. They strayed from the trail, took up new lives that had nothing to do with Mormonism. They would lie low, hide themselves, and live normal lives on the frontier of Iowa. Blair and Briggs and missionaries who followed contacted persons and organized branches in the southwestern counties. In Iowa, the missionaries would find a network of former members that included many highly placed officials of the Nauvoo era. W. Blair first connected with the tradition as a Williamite, or follower of William Smith. He later investigated Charles B. Thompson's group before joining the new organization, where he was ordained an apostle in 1858. The Briggs family joined the LDS Church in Wisconsin when Edmund was a child. They later affiliated with James Strang before Edmund became part of the new organization. Blair and Briggs set out from Amboy, Illinois to cross Iowa, searching out the scattered saints. They walked rather closely following the Exodus Trail, contacting early members and noting the results in their journals. Quote, in Stringtown, found John Archer and family who were hit up and wished to continue so for the present and did not want it known among their neighbors that they were ever Mormons. But they also found church members who were willing to listen to their message and to join with the reorganizing church. Blair and Briggs organized the first two branches in Decatur County near Garden Grove Little River near the Missouri state line, where they found groups of people who were either RLDS members and their families. Some of these were former members from Nauvoo, some were Rigdonites, and a few were Strangites. Continuing, the two missionaries stumbled across the Alpheus Cutler group in what would be Mills County, near Farm Creek in Manti. This would become a branch. Blair and Briggs reached Kanesville, now Council Bluffs, in August. They sought out early members and their friends and family. Their networking system allowed them to establish 5 branches, totaling at least 100 members, with many scattered converts that would become the foundation of later branches. Groves were often preferred to prairie land as settlement because of the availability of water, shelter from blizzard winds, building materials, and abundant food in the form of wildlife. The saints often located in these groves, and towns and branches took their names from them. Many groves bear the names of early Mormons, such as Lytle, Harris, Bigler, Mason, Leland, and Gallen. Other groves bore a location name, for instance, 12 Mile and 6 Mile, which were measured from Harris Grove, an early LDS site. Blair and Briggs encountered several factional groups, among them the Rigdonites in Decatur County, Thompsonites in Preparation, Cutlerites in the Farm Creek area, Strangites in Council Bluffs and other areas, and the Bishopites scattered around. Also, of course, they engaged with Brighamites who still remained. Within a year, 15 branches had been organized, either by Blair or Briggs or other elders. Members were added by baptism or by acceptance on original baptism. In existing branches, and other former members continue to be found through the following decade. By 1870, there were 44 RLDS branches in Iowa, 37 of which were in the southwest corner of the state. The number of branches grew to 61 by 1880, and by 1890, there were approximately 5,000 members in Iowa, most concentrated in the southwest. By 1870, important sources when researching the RLDS experience in southwest Iowa include some of the following: membership records books, local record books, deceased membership files, Saints Herald publication, Journal of History, diaries and journals. You can read the list there. These were sources that I was able to use. I'll tell you the story of this. They were not really hidden, but like many researchers, you have to know where to look. I'll tell you my story, how I got started on research in the early church in southwest Iowa. I have been interested in genealogy a long time. Almost all my ancestors were part of the early church, going back to early Kirtland, Ohio, west to Missouri, then to Nauvoo, then to southwest Iowa. Some of them joined factional memberships, and finally to Independence, Missouri. While researching at the RLDS library in 1989, Dick Howard, then his church historian, mentioned to me that they were looking for a part-time staff assistant. I applied for the job and got it. While working there, I learned of organizations that were involved in furthering historical research and understanding church history. For instance, the John Whitmer Historical Association, which were mostly RLDS members, and the Mormon History Association, which were mostly LDS members. And I joined both. A call for papers for one of these organizations suggested a paper on early RLDS activity in southwest Iowa. The eventual site of the RLDS church headquarters in Lamoni. I looked out my office door and I saw shelves with old church record books. missionary and member journals, boxes of photographs, other sources, and I had an epiphany. I just might be able to do something like this. And so I did. I gave a presentation at a conference and continued to work in the archives for almost 30 years. I gathered my research and other sources into what is called a finding aid for archival research. It's available in the Community of Christ Library and Archives and is open to researchers. There are 270 folders of information ranging from early Southwest Iowa history and maps, the trail across Iowa from Nauvoo to Council Bluffs, winter quarters, and the start of the trek to Utah. Also, those who chose not to go west and the establishment of settlements in Southwest Iowa. There were factional leaders who established settlements. Early RLDS branch membership records were available, individual, family group information. Genealogists and historians can find a lot of information. Many RLDS leaders, church officials, and missionaries came from Southwest Iowa, a harvest of the first decades of missionary efforts. The eventual preponderance of church membership and concentration of leadership directly led to the establishment of the church headquarters in Lamoni in the mid-1870s.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to finish up with just a couple of minutes on the legacy of the church.
You're muted.
I'm going to finish up with just a couple of minutes on the legacy of the earliest church in Southwest Iowa. You see one of John Hamer's maps showing branches or congregations scattered up and down the Missouri River. Off the map would be Lamoni, Iowa, which was established in the mid-1870s as a very careful and measured attempt at gathered community by the followers of Joseph Smith III. He had lived through his father's experiments at community building, so was very cautious. They sold shares in this Order of Enoch, this company, very carefully laid out and planned the community. By 1895, it would be home to Graceland College, now Graceland University. You also see here Joseph Smith III's Liberty Hall in Lamoni, one of the historic sites that I manage. Reunions are another Southwest Iowa legacy. We made the decision in the early 1880s to have general conferences, church conferences once a year versus twice a year. This was hugely controversial, with some members concerned about missing out on the fellowship of gathering together. Charles Derry and John Hawley, both formerly LDS in Utah before returning to Iowa, sponsored a resolution calling for the church to hold annual reunion meetings to replace the Second General Conference. This resolution passed at our April 1883 conference held in Kirtland Temple. An organizing committee selected Leland's Grove, Shelby County, Iowa, as the location for the first reunion. You see a photo of Benjamin Leland's cabin, for whom the grove was named. They also decided that, quote, no saloons, shows, swings, or any other profane amusements shall be allowed upon the grounds. The event took place in September. It rained for 4 of the 8 days, and it still became clear that the organizers significantly underestimated the turnout. Reunions proved to be widely popular, with gatherings soon taking place around the world, and 5,000 to 10,000 people turning out for some weekend services at the Iowa Annual Reunion by 1890. Today we have 2 mission centers, like a diocese, in Southwest Iowa, Omaha, Council Bluffs, and Lamoni, Heartland, and they share a permanent reunion ground at Guthrie Grove. My favorite campground is Tiona, Zion in Tahitian, in New South Wales, Australia. You see the green cathedral there in the top right corner. Bottom left is one of dozens of tents set up around Kirtland Temple, where we held reunions for decades. That's in Ohio. Bottom right, Dunfield House in Wales. And we have many other campgrounds scattered around the world. These reunions, or family camps, are the most formative experiences we have in Community of Christ today, as we gather as a church family to try and build Zion. the peaceable kingdom of God on earth, even if for just a week. It's been a privilege to share with you just a little bit today. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions once everybody is done presenting. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.